I'm taking up a few items that have been touched on by Ruth Hagengruber and by Paolo Dario. Especially, I'm talking about the free syntagmata, namely subject and predicate clauses. One is New Renaissance. The second is scientific humanism. And the third is industrial humanism. And I think I'm flattered that Professor Dario is listening, Professor Battaglia is listening, because I think what I'm going to say rotates around the mission of the school Sant'Anna, where both are active. So New Renaissance is the subject of his paper. It's a big issue, something that will concern us with in the next decades. But let me start with Humanismo Scientifico. So actually, it's Italy where the three syntagmata were born. Humanismo Scientifico, scientific humanism, has been defined by the current president of the National Research Council, Maria Chiara Carrozza, in a paper she gave in Milano at the Fondazione Donnocchi a year ago. What does it mean? It means that science is a method, it's evidence-based. So we're talking about COVID, so evidence-based. We need to rely on data, and this data must be verified, it must be open, it must be subject to discussion. But the human being is the objective. That is, science is looking at the human being. While industrial humanism, Humanismo Industriale, is also an interesting syntagma, because it goes back actually to an initiative of the industrialist tire fabricant Pirelli. They had a review, Rivista Pirelli, and they've collected everything into a database which is called industrial humanism. So what does industrial humanism mean? Well, it means that whatever the industry is proposing, and we are talking about AI, as Ruth was saying, that is, we have a new understanding of science. It's no more binary, it's ternary. I like that very much. We have AI, but AI must look at the human being. That's so simple. So we have humanism as a mission, human-centered AI, obviously, but also the economy for the human being and not the human being for the economy. So the issue of humanism comes up. But let me now go back to New Renaissance. Now, New Renaissance, it's more than a dream. It's something that's becoming real, let's say. First, I'm talking of humanities first. The humanities are experiencing a renaissance because since I love to date the beginning of digital research in the humanities with the founding year of the Istituto per il Lessico Intellettuale Europeo in Rome, which I had the pleasure of directing a few years ago. So they started in 1964 by feeding texts into machines. And that was the beginning of digital libraries and the natural language processing. But now we have scientists scoring the humanities. They work with data. Data are fair. Data are open. There is a great movement in that. Actually, the current standard is what we call today cultural analytics, which is a very, very interesting project. But if we look at heritage, also heritage is experiencing a renaissance. Heritage-led innovation is becoming a big thing. If you think of 3D reconstructions of heritage sites, 3D reconstructions of the domus in Pompeii, and eventually we have what we call the backbone of European research and innovation. Well, not my words, but the words of the president of the Republic of Portugal, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, who stated this in a very important conference in November 2018. He said, social innovation is the backbone of all European research and innovation. which means again that we have to look at how the human is coping with reality. We have social infrastructures. Social infrastructures are schools, lifelong learning. We have social infrastructure in health, in long-term care, and we have social infrastructures in urban, in mobility and urban housing. So all this is obviously human-centered. But let me come to the issue. The first time we find the syntagma new Renaissance in a document of the European Union, because this is what we're talking about, is 2011. It's a document of the European Research Area Board. It called for a new Renaissance, for a paradigm shift in how we think and live. And now we're talking 2011. Our growing I'm quoting, our growing technological dependency, our problematic relationship with effects of globalization, our mounting demand on finite resources, all these are occurring together and will force a social, economic, and political change. We cannot yet see the precise contours of that change, but we can see that it will have to be profound, as great as the transition from an agrarian to an industrial society half a millennium ago. Fighting climate change, or pick just one of the grand challenges on the horizon, will require as much effort in terms of changing our ways of living and working globally as it required the Middle Ages to get rid of feudalism. So this is a European Union document, which I've quoted in a few papers. And I start with that, but let me come to another paper and then I construct the argument. The second paper is a paper written by James Hankins, who is an historian at Birkbeck College, and he published this in June 2021 in an intellectual review, which is called The Public Discourse. And Hankins has made it clear that today everybody might build one's own Renaissance. And in fact, in Italy, we have been struck by a statement that used to be the president of the Council of Ministers, Honorable Matteo Renzi, who said Saudi Arabia is going to experience a beautiful Renaissance, a beautiful new Renaissance. They have whatever it takes for starting a new Renaissance. I like that. It's something that we can look into. Now, how do we define Renaissance? Well, Renaissance is an historical category. It goes back to 1860. The first to speak about Renaissance or Renaissance, the way you put it, I think they're both valid, is Jacob Burckhardt. Jacob Burckhardt in 1860 said, okay, this is the end of the Middle Ages and we start again, and we have a period of bridging between the exit of the Dark Ages into the scientific revolution. Now, it's interesting to see when you start a new Renaissance, but as I was saying, as the European Research Area Board said, it's a passage from feudalism to the modern age. So when do we start with the Renaissance? The Renaissance can be started with the discovery of America, but actually it is better to have it started after the 7 years long pandemic of 1346 to 1353. Italians know well this pandemic, this epidemic as a Black Pest, because every school kid reads the Decameron, and the Decameron has been written during the Black Pest because people had to be isolated in agricultural sites. So the Black Pest was 7 years long, and it killed 1/3 of European population, from 60 million to 40 million. Now, we don't have that with COVID, but we are certainly having a big shock. It's not killing 0.5% of the world population, but it's stopping by a big part of it. And it could even stop again. So the trauma of the pandemic is similar to that of the Black Pest, and this is so saying putting some corroboration to the idea of the new Renaissance. Now, why do we want to speak? So, what are the problems of this idea of the new Renaissance? Well, the first problem is that we don't want it to be Eurocentric. It's too easy to say we are world champions in defining beauty and in connecting to nature. Everybody must have its own Renaissance. It must be either a global sentiment that after the pandemic things will start again at full speed, or it can be local. And I don't mind if Saudi Arabia says we are experiencing new Renaissance. It's fine. We can have Renaissance everywhere, provided people, there is a nice definition of Renaissance. It's, sorry, I'm looking for this. It's a time in which the stakes are highest and in which there is a sentiment that we are going to tackle, that we are going to do something good. The approximate, so again, when do we start the Renaissance? The Renaissance, there is a book that appeared in 2017 by Goldin and Kutarna, The Age of Discovery, and they have the Renaissance, so the current Renaissance start from 1990, that is the end of the Berlin Wall. That's a period in which things changed and the economy has changed, the global order came again. So it's an interesting point of view. Now we are taking that up again after the pandemics. But it's not so easy to see how the Renaissance must be European. And here we have an interesting, sorry, I'm looking for the quote. We have an interesting initiative of the European Union that says, we, with the words of the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, she says, we want a new European Bauhaus. What does that mean? Let's go back to the idea of industrial humanism. The arts and crafts are there to make life for the human being better. The arts and crafts actually were not Gropius with the Bauhaus. It was William Morris 50 years before in England who started this idea of putting beauty into houses, opening windows, shedding light into dwellings that is reconnected to nature. And the third item of the new European Bauhaus, creating cohesion, that is creating the conditions for an inclusive society. So as I said, this started in England at the end of the 19th century. It was taken up by Walter Gropius in Dessau in 1925. It was a Bauhaus. And now we are taking it up again. Why do we want to do this? Again, because time has come for working towards industrial humanism. That is, the economy must be work for the human being. And this is clear, and this is something that has been decided on, so that we have this initiative, New European Bauhaus. But the big question is, how do we connect the industrial with the contents? What are the content? Obviously, we are talking about culture, and this explains the second part of my paper. We are talking the second item of my paper: humanities, culture, and new Renaissance. Now, what is culture? Now, culture is appropriating common goods, but appropriating common goods is a process. So the content is common goods, works of arts, novels, movies, landscapes, archaeological sites. These are common goods because they don't belong to an individual family. They are part of the public domain. But this is a process, and it's a process of experiencing it. So there must be humans that are there and go through an actual experience. And this experience can be shared, provided there are spaces of exchange. And let me conclude the paper by providing an optimistic view of the third aspect I wanted to mention. How do communities accept this idea of the new Renaissance? And are they doing it? Obviously, they are doing it because one of the interesting things of the pandemic is that people have become more reflective. That is, they have had more chances to sit down and experience common goods and reflect. And also the fact that we are working together, we are becoming co-authors, let's say. And let me conclude with a little experience I myself had in 2019 in Helsinki, because it's something that gives food for dreams. So I was invited at a meeting of the International Institute of Philosophy. So from the airport, I came to the railway station. Instead of going to the left towards the university, I went to the right, because I knew that there was a square in which a new public library had been inaugurated a few weeks before. And the new public library is the OODI Helsinki Central Public Library, OODI, which is a very interesting building, because I entered into it and I saw that on the ground floor, they had checkout books checkout, a restaurant, an auditorium for movies, and the garderobe. On the third floor, they had books, not many books. And especially they had very interesting seating possibilities on tables, on steps, on sofas, on cushions. So people were there and they were reading. Actually, they were not reading from paper books. Most of the readers were reading from laptops. And that made an interesting ambiente. People were relaxed, they were reading, had books to look into, but especially they were feeling well in a central public library. But what do you have in the second floor? The second floor was a big surprise, because when you visit the second floor, and we go back to the European Bauhaus, the municipality of Helsinki had offered to the visitors, or the users of the library on the second floor, think about what? Sewing machines, so that the children could learn how to mend their own clothes. Very nice, free of charge, just to learn. And then the municipality of Helsinki offered the users 3D printers. So again, children could register and go to the printer and print their prototypes. Very nice. You learn a lot from that. But the most interesting is that on the second floor, there were no books, sewing machines, 3D printers, some kitchen arrangements also for teaching how to cook. But the most interesting, they had 7 glass-walled meeting rooms. And how did these meeting rooms look like? Very simple. Actually, no walls, glasses, in order to make sure that it was an open space. And every room had 12 chairs and 2 monitors, which means that everybody in the city could book the room, come with a group, sit in the chairs, connect to distant participants via the monitor, and look at common goods on the other monitor. And this is a a space of exchange in which open data, open science is up for open innovation. So what these groups were producing, which were actually mostly the most obvious thing that groups do, that is photo tagging. Now we were putting together photos and putting names under the photos. This is a very important part of book collecting and image collecting. And I see here in this ability of using AI, of using industry for the benefits of humankind, a very big step towards realizing what a new Renaissance is. So, and this does not need to be only European. Everybody can build its own Renaissance. This we learn from James Hankins, and I strongly believe in that. I thank you for your attention.